host this sacred gathering, and we give thanks for the abiding friendship that we share with the Jewish community here in Shreveport. We come together today to remember, to affirm that the truth of the Holocaust must never be forgotten. The scale of loss we remember today is nearly beyond comprehension. 11 million lives extinguished. Imagine this. If we rang a single bell for each of those victims, one every 10 seconds, and never stopped, not for sleep, not for food, not even for a breath, it would take nearly 3.5 years to finish. 3.5 years of constant echoing sound. Each strike, a name, a soul, a story. Each strike, a life that mattered. That is the weight of what we carry in remembrance today. Human memory is fragile, and disturbingly, there are forces in the world actively working to distort or erase the past. This annual liturgy stands as a sacred witness to the truth and a bulwark against forgetting. Its importance cannot be overstated. When this service was first held at St. Paul's in 1998, 27 years ago, Holocaust survivor Rose Van Tine shared her story of survival. Rose survived the camps as a young adult and later escaped to Shreveport, and she shared these words. "It's not that I relive the tragedy, but I remember and always will. Things other people do not notice bring back memories for me, like the whistle of a train, a police siren, smoke coming from a chimney, standing in line for food, and when I hear children singing, I cry." Rose once asked in disbelief, how could they hate with such passion that it overtook their morals and dignity? Such evil would be unthinkable, except that it happened, and it could happen again. Rose's life reminds us not only of the horrors endured, but of the strength of the human spirit. Speaking almost as if to us gathered here today, Rose said, "When all the survivors have departed from this earth, I hope and pray that our efforts to keep the legacy of the Holocaust alive will be carried on by future generations." We give thanks for Rose and for all survivors who bravely share their stories. According to a recent survey by the Anti-Defamation League, the median age of Holocaust survivors is now 87 years old. Soon, there will be no living witnesses. Rose herself died 15 years ago at the age of 88. The sacred work of memory now belongs to us and to every generation to come. It is no secret that the Jewish people have long borne the burden of being scapegoated through millennia and into our own time. In 2024, the ADL recorded a staggering number of anti-Semitic incidents in the United States, more than one per hour. Holocaust denial and distortion remains a real and present danger, one we must confront with truth, courage, and clarity. It is, and it feels unrelenting, yet our hope remains, for we are rooted in God's enduring promise. As the psalmist declares, those who sowed with tears will reap with songs of joy. Those who go out weeping, carrying the seed, will come again with joy, shouldering their sheaves. Today, we go out weeping, carrying the seed. Let us pray. O Holy One, we gather in solemn remembrance of the Holocaust, the darkest chapter in human history. Today we honor the lives lost, the voices silenced, the families torn apart, and the survivors whose courage lights the way forward. May this space be holy ground where remembrance deepens our resolve and memory becomes a light guiding us toward justice, compassion, and peace. Help us to stand together and speak the truth, united in our shared humanity and committed to loving our neighbors. Let our remembering today be an act of love and a sign of hope. Amen. And now I'd like to introduce the St. Paul's Adult Choir. And now I'd like to invite Mayors Arsenault and Chandler. Mayor Arsenault has the stage to himself.
May there someday be love. May there someday be peace. Let us resolve here today that we shall always remember and we shall not forget. It is my honor to be here, as I am every year. This is one of the first things that goes on my calendar because it is so important for us to remember those who survived and those who didn't. It is my honor today to present a joint proclamation from the mayors of Shreveport and Bossier City. Whereas the Holocaust was the systematic persecution and annihilation of European Jewry by Nazi Germany and its collaborators between 1933 and 1945. And whereas the history of the Holocaust offers an opportunity to reflect on the moral responsibilities of individuals, societies, and governments. And whereas the cities of Shreveport and Bossier City, our nation, the land of the free, should always remember the terrible events of the Holocaust and remain vigilant against hatred, persecution, and tyranny. And whereas we should actively rededicate ourselves to the principles of individual freedom, justice, national liberty, and equality. And whereas the cities of Shreveport and Bossier City wish to remember the victims of the Holocaust, as well as to reflect on the need for respect of all of humanity. Now, therefore, we, Tom Arsenault, Mayor of the City of Shreveport, and Thomas H. Chandler, Mayor of the City of Bossier City, do proclaim Sunday, April 27, 2025, as Shreveport-Bossier Holocaust Remembrance Day in the cities of Shreveport and Bossier City, and in honor of the survivors and in memory of those who were killed, as well as the rescuers and liberators. We urge all citizens to strive to overcome intolerance and indifference through learning and remembrance. And the original proclamation is signed by both myself and Mayor Chandler.
Barbara Joseph, would you please come forward now to present the prizes?
Thank you to Father Cannon for chairing this year's Holocaust Remembrance Service, to the St. Paul's community for hosting today's event, and to all of you for attending. As part of this annual Remembrance Service, the Northwest Louisiana community supports a literary and art project that encourages middle school and high school students to voice their understandings of the tragedy of the past and their hopes for the future. Middle school students can submit art and essays, and high school students can submit art, essays, poems, musical compositions, and short stories. The source of this year's prompt was the Auschwitz Jewish Center Foundation that is in the town next to Auschwitz, the site of the worst hate crime in human history. The foundation stands firmly as a global beacon, using education to create allies and advocates who will stand against hatred now and in the future. They teach lessons of the Holocaust to underscore what hatred can lead to if stoked and encouraged. The prompt asked, "What made the Holocaust possible?" Students were then asked to choose at least one of the following follow-up questions in their response. What conditions and ideas made the Holocaust possible? How and why did ordinary people across Europe contribute to the persecution of their Jewish neighbors? How did German professionals and civil leaders contribute to the persecution of Jews and other groups? How can we use lessons from the Holocaust to fight hatred and bigotry in all forms and provide humanitarian assistance to victims of mass atrocities and genocide? As I'm sure you can imagine, these are not easy questions to answer. But over 250 students from throughout Caddo and Bossier parishes did just that. One student who submitted short stories in 2023 and 2024 shared about their experience. I wanted to say how much the service and contest has meant to me the last 2 years. The contest has convinced me of the power of writing to stir emotion and cause change. And the service has given me hope that at the very least, my community is both not allowing history to repeat itself and striving towards something greater, if not also the world. This is a truly special event, and I pray for many more years of successful contests and services so that more people get to experience it as I have. All of the teachers who had students submit entries are listed on page 2 of your handout. The literary and art project could not be what it is without the efforts of the classroom teachers and librarians who worked with these students. The schools are listed there as well, and we thank our partners at the district level. Their communication with all of the schools led to submissions this year from schools that had not participated before in recent years. I'd also like to recognize the judges listed at the bottom of page 3, who read all of the eligible entries and assessed them for originality and creativity, historical accuracy, and appropriately addressing the prompt. One of the judges shared this with me. Poetry is not a solution to the troubles that we faced in the 1930s or that we face today. It does, however, help us in our quest to be more fully human. Young people need this tool to navigate the onset of adulthood. And poetry needs young people to be encouraged in their natural instincts to rhyme against reason, to have permission to write, read, and love the written, spoken, and sung word. Please join me in thanking the 38 teachers and 12 judges for their time and efforts this year. At this time, I would like to ask each of the students who had a winning entry to come up along this side and tell us your name, school, teacher, the type of entry, and the title of your work. These details are also in the handout on page 3, if you'd like to turn to that page while they gather up here. Please hold your applause until all the students have spoken.
My name is Kirtan Jagan Mohan. I attend Caddo Magnet High. My teacher was Katie Sweeten. I submitted a short story, and it is called Arbe Magfry, Preserving the Past to Confront the Future.
My name is Jackson Lawrence. I'm from Airline High School, and my teacher is Briley Davis. I wrote a short story with the title of Crumbled Faith.
My name is Emma Farrell. I go to First Baptist Church School, and my teacher was Miss Stody. My type of entry was art, and it is called First in Line.
My name is Madeline Mayer. I go to Caddo Magnet. My teacher was Emily Welch, and I submitted an art entry, and it is called Remembering Keeps Us Free.
Hello, my name is Callie Kerpluck. My teacher was Andrew Medellin and Katie Sweeten, and I went to Caddo Magnet High School. My poem was titled Nothing to Do with Us.
My name is Jaden Keenan. I go to Airline High School. My teacher was Jamie Hill, and I submitted artwork titled The Devil's Stolen Gold.
Hello, my name is Arif Kohli. I go to Caddo Parish Magnet High School. I'm in 11th grade, and my high school essay was titled Oppressionist Fires, and my teacher was Mrs. McGuire.
Hello, my name is Adlia Darcy. I'm a junior at Caddo Parish Magnet High School. My teacher was Miss McGuire, and I wrote an essay entitled Birds of a Feather.
Hello, my name is Michaela Gafford. I go to Caddo Parish Magnet High School. My teacher is Neil Normand, and my project was entitled My Name is Prejudice, but you already know who I am.
My name is Yorth Tracy. I go to CMM. My teacher is Terry Durst, and I drew a art piece, and it's called All Caged Up.
My name is Rachel Evans. I go to Caddo Parish Magnet High School. My teacher is Andrew Medlin, and I submitted a short story called Don't Look.
Hello, my name is Samantha Cheerhart. I go to Caddo Magnet High School. My teachers are Katie Sweden and Andrew Medlin. I wrote a poem called Little Monsters.
My name is Tro Nicholson. I go to CMM. My teacher is Samantha Green, and I wrote an essay called What Made the Holocaust Possible.
Congratulations to these students. While they are still standing here, will all the other students who participated in this year's Literary and Arts Project please stand? And if y'all will all please remain standing one more moment. If you are still seated and you're under the age of 20, I'd like to ask you to stand to join your peers so we can thank all of you for being here today to learn from the past in order to create a better future. Thank you. You may be seated. We will now hear from Michaela Gafford, who will read her winning essay.
Hello, I'm Michaela Gafford, and this is my essay. My name is Prejudice, but you already know who I am. Greek philosopher Aristotle explained that hatred is a feeling that with concentration and fixation becomes a pervasive mood characterized by the desire to eliminate the object of hatred. The continuous harboring of the hate created a pathway of death for the Jewish population. In a normalization of hatred, ignorance prevails while logic and morals die. The object of hatred consumes one's entire thought, emotions, and being, justifying the elimination or harm of the object of hatred. It is under these conditions that the Holocaust was made possible. The government's sponsorship of Jewish hatred fueled the Holocaust. Propaganda from the Nazi-controlled German government set fire to Jewish hatred and anti-Semitism. Posters, speeches, political cartoons, and images all worked to establish a norm of hatred towards the Jewish people. One anti-Semitic poster acquired by the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum compared Jewish people to diseases, specifically tuberculosis, syphilis, and cancer. The poster explains that these diseases are curable, but the biggest of plagues must be ended, the Jew. It is that normalization of abnormal mental states nourished by hatred that the Holocaust was made possible. With this normalization, ordinary people across Europe contributed to the persecution of their Jewish neighbors, both knowingly and unknowingly. The average person began to accept the persecution of a people as a way of life, as long as the persecuted was not them. In Nazi Germany, during times of the Holocaust, the ordinary people of Europe became well acquainted with the idea of hatred and persecution. This, perhaps even more than the government-sanctioned propaganda, allowed for the conditions of the Holocaust to rise. For a government to persecute is one thing, but for your neighbor to view you as the root of their problems breeds a level of normalized hatred that made way for the conditions of the Holocaust. A subtle, small dig at Jews became contorted into hopes for elimination. Anti-Semitic comments somehow distorted themselves into the night of broken glass. Segregation and ghettos became concentration camps. These concentration camps became extermination camps, which would become memorials after one murder was repeated 6 million times. The belief that lessons from the Holocaust will curtail hatred and prevent all genocide, persecution, and mass atrocities is a utopian one. When the Holocaust occurred, it was believed that an event as such would never take place, but after every tragic, prejudicial event, this is always repeated. The majority will not take the lessons of the Holocaust with a grain of salt, but will they check their own prejudices? If they don't check their own prejudices, when they are small, in the event of being placed in an echo chamber and hearing their own same beliefs justified, how are we able to ensure that another Holocaust won't happen? And what, furthermore, are we meant to do when the government tells us that a certain group is our own enemy? Will we think before we are able to be indoctrinated, or will we be like the people of Europe? Thank you.
I'm sorry we do not have time to hear every student with a winning literary submission read today. But please know that all of the winning entries are posted on HolocaustRemembranceService.org, and I encourage you to visit the site later today to read them. The winning art entries will be on display at the reception following this service in the St. Paul's Parlor. It is now my honor to introduce our guest speaker. Kathy Kaser has written more than 30 books focusing on the Second World War and the Holocaust, including The Secret of Gabby's Dresser, Hiding Edith, To Look a Nazi in the Eye, The Sound of Freedom, and Broken Strings. A winner of the Jewish Book Award in the US and the Jewish Book Award in Canada, and the Yad Vashem Award for Children's Holocaust Literature in Israel, Kathy has written unforgettable stories inspired by real events. She lectures in colleges and universities on the topic of teaching sensitive material to young people, and speaks to children in schools and libraries around the world about the importance of the Holocaust and keeping its memory alive. After her presentation, there will be time for a few questions. If you think of a question while Ms. Kaser is speaking or as she wraps up, you can text it along with your name to the phone number on page 4 in your handout. Please welcome Kathy Kaser.
Thank you, Barbara. So I have slides, so just bear with me for one moment as we get this up and going. And let's hope it all works. A hush comes over the crowd. What do you think that is? Yep. Should I try this again? Or take it out and put it back in. Let's do this. Okay, any other thoughts? Rabbi, projector's on, I'm plugged in, cords are in. Yep. It was working well. Hold on, everyone. That's just a power, yep.
There we go. Here comes the...
Oh.
There we go.
Yes. Okay. Yes, there we go. Phew. I can talk without them, but it's so much better with them. Well, it's such an honor for me to be here visiting with you today. I come from Toronto, Canada, your good neighbor to the north, and I love this opportunity to speak to you about my writing and my journey to write these books about the Holocaust, primarily for a young readership. So there are a few things you need to know about me as I get started in this. The first thing to know is that this is a second career for me. My first career was as a psychologist working with troubled teens, and I gave that up many years ago to pursue this glamorous career of writing for young people. I often refer to this as my midlife crisis that worked. So think about it. Some of us, many of us, may have a dream about what we want to be doing or what we envision we might be doing down the road in the future. I was lucky to turn my dream into a reality. As you heard, I've written more than 30 books for young readers, and I have a couple more on the go. Somebody has to remember to ask me, what is the next book that I'm going to be writing? That's a good question. I always say that as long as there are publishers who are willing to publish my stories, and thankfully, even in this day and age, there are publishers willing to publish my books, I will continue to write them. Second thing you need to know about me, and these are just some of my books, by the way. If you want any more information about my writing, please go to my website. It's fairly up to date. Second thing to know about me is that I have had the privilege of meeting and interviewing about 100 survivors for the many books that I've written. And I say that it is a privilege because we all know that this is a shrinking community. Father Cannon, you said that the median age was 87. Okay, so my research told me that the median age was 89, but 87, 88, 89, this is an aging community. And survivors are passing away at a rate of about 100 a month. When I speak to kids about this history, I am always aware that they are the last generation. We are the last generation that will ever get to meet and hear a survivor speak. Then that voice will be silenced. Couple that with rising instances of anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial, and the need to find and preserve this history grows even more important. As a writer, I know that I am facing a window of opportunity to find and record these stories, and that is a window that is quickly closing. Next, you need to know that I am not a teacher, I'm not a scholar, I'm not a historian, I am certainly not an expert on the Holocaust. I refer to myself as a storyteller and one who has chosen to write these Holocaust stories for young readers. I love collecting quotes, and one of my favorites is from the researcher and journalist and historian Doris Kearns Goodwin. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with her writing. She writes wonderful biographies of US presidents. And she once said, "History at its best is about stories." Think about the history that we remember. Definitely dates, times, places are important, but the history that stays with us, the history that we retain, is often history that is told to us through stories. I'm also aware that I am writing about a real time in history, and the facts of this time are critically important. As I said, there are still too many deniers who would challenge the truth of this history. So my goal, and I take it seriously, is to be responsible to this history and ensure that the context within which I write is a real and accurate one. But as a writer, I also have a responsibility not only to inform my audience, but also to engage them. And I constantly tread that fine and careful line of informing and engaging in the writing that I do. And I think that's what good books about history should do. They should inform and they should engage. And I think that's what Doris Kearns Goodwin meant when she said this. So finally, it's important to know that I am the child of Holocaust survivors, as you heard. My mother survived the war in hiding. I'll tell you her story in a moment. And my father was a survivor of 2 concentration camps. So my stories do come from a deeply personal place. I have to tell you that I grew up in a family of talkers. My parents were very open with me about their survival experiences. We know that that is not always the case for some survivors, many survivors, who find it too difficult to talk about this history. My parents spoke openly. And their friends, who were also part of the community of survivors that I grew up in, also spoke openly. And I was that child who lingered close by, listening into their stories, eager to ask a million questions, which they were able to answer. I always say that I think my parents were the first 2 survivors that I ever interviewed. I didn't think of it as interviewing at the time. It was simply asking a million questions that they would answer. But when I started to write, I knew that there was one story that I wanted to start with, and that was a story about my mother, whose name was Gabby. My mother came from a small village in the eastern part of what was once Czechoslovakia, now Slovakia. And as a young Jewish girl growing up in the 1930s and early 40s, she was in danger of being arrested and taken to the concentration camps. Her mother, my grandmother, actually hid my mother in a dresser, a cabinet that sat in my grandmother's dining room, while Nazi soldiers were searching through the house looking for my mother. Fortunately, she was among the lucky ones to survive. And that story of how she had hidden in that cabinet became my very first book, the first of more than 30, The Secret of Gabby's Dresser. Now, Gabby's story didn't end with her hiding in the dresser. Eventually, my family had to leave their home and find a safe place to hide as a family. They ended up traveling to a small mountain village north of where they were living. And it was there that they hid in the hayloft of a barn that was owned by a Catholic farmer and his wife, a very brave man. And they hid in that barn for 1.5 years until the war ended. And that story became the sequel to The Secret of Gabby's Dresser, a book called The Night Spies. So I write about the Holocaust because this is my passion, and perhaps my purpose. I think some people search for a purpose in life. For others, we're lucky to have our purpose find us. And I think that's been the case for me. And perhaps all of this was nurtured at the knee of my parents and their friends when I was just a child listening to their stories. As a child of survivors, I know that I have a responsibility to pass these stories on. At the same time, I think we have a collective responsibility, a collective purpose, if you will, to ensure that this history remains alive for future generations. We are all part of the next generation, the second and the third, not just someone like me who has a direct link to this Holocaust. We are all linked as human beings to this history. So I'm going to talk about a few of my books, but I'm going to start by talking about why I think this writing and this history is, for young people, is difficult, especially in the midst of the turmoil in the world. And there are certainly difficulties that I and others face. One of the issues about writing this history for the next generation is that history often becomes reduced simply to statistics. One of the first ways in which people try to convey the enormity of the horror of the Holocaust is to recite a number. And everyone knows what the number is. It is 6 million, and we know 5 million others as well. 6 million is what everyone knows. 6 million is what everyone quotes. Even kids who I speak to who have limited knowledge of this time in history can tell me two things. They can say that Hitler was evil and 6 million Jews were killed. But what does that really mean? The notion of 6 million Jews perishing during this time is overwhelming, even to adults like us. And I think it is a notion that is quite meaningless to young people. In New York City a few years ago, there was an exhibit of the art of Alex Colville. I don't know if you're familiar with his art. It's very recognizable. Once you've seen one Colville, you will recognize it from then on. And this is an example of one of his pieces. But Alex Colville was also the first art journalist to enter Bergen-Belsen after its liberation. And his job was to record in some way what he saw. And he created art like this piece. Very different from the piece before. And he once said this, quote, "You see one body and you feel terrible, but seeing 500 bodies doesn't make you feel 500 times worse. In fact, there is a certain point at which you begin to feel nothing." So I believe that that statistic, and it's an important one, don't get me wrong, but that statistic, 6 million, really makes us feel nothing. For its lessons to be appreciated, the Holocaust has to be told one story at a time, one person at a time, one family at a time, and raised from the statistics to the individuals. And that's what I strive to do in my writing. Tell the stories of individuals. The second problem that we face as writers of this history for young people is what the psychologist Adam Mueller would say: we are conduits of the past, and often imperfect conduits of the past. There is the ongoing worry that as writers we will shape history in a way that is inaccurate. Now, I happen to agree with that statement, and remember, I am someone who writes historical fiction and nonfiction, but I certainly do write historical fiction. As writers, we do interpret history. We sometimes create a somewhat reconstructed version of history. Even memoirs, Holocaust memoirs, have come under attack recently. There are some who would believe that these are the only true representation of this time, but there are others who have suggested that memoirs are untrustworthy, because of the fact that they may be complicated by the fallibility of memory. And now we find ourselves once again in this time of rising anti-Semitism and a growing number of deniers and revisionists who will point to those of us who interpret history in our writing as evidence of the inaccuracy of this time. And they will use that to fuel their ignorance and their anti-Semitic acts. So here are some chilling statistics. A poll done several years ago of North American adults found the following. 1 in 5 North Americans don't know what the Holocaust was. 1/2 of adults in North America cannot name a Nazi concentration camp. 1/4 believe in some conspiracy theory that the number of Jews killed has been exaggerated. In 2021, in my country of Canada, 1/2 of the hate crimes targeted Jews. In the US, in the first 2 months of 2023, attacks on synagogues increased 71% from the same period the year before. And we know that these are now old statistics. Since the attacks in Israel, anti-Semitic incidents are up 400% in college campuses across the US. And in Canada, we have experienced the highest rise in anti-Semitism since audits of anti-Semitism began in the 1970s. So, as I said, I write historical fiction, but accurate representation in literature of this history is critically important. We are facing many challenges to keep this literature alive for our children and our grandchildren. Another one of those challenges is the chilling trend in recent years to censor or ban Holocaust books from library shelves. In fact, in the first half of 2023, nearly 1,500 books were banned across the country, a 28% increase from the previous 6 months, and those are just the reported cases. Now, that number, I will say, also includes the banning not just of Holocaust books, but also books with political, legal, religious, moral, or commercial motives. But let's talk about books about the Holocaust. And I'm going to start with something light, because goodness knows we can always use something light, particularly these days. So here's one of my favorite Peanuts comics. This is Charlie Brown, Schroeder, and Sally. And Charlie is saying, "Why would they ban Miss Sweet Story's book from the school library?" To which Schroeder replies, "I can't believe it. I just can't believe it." And Charlie says, "Maybe there are some things in her book that we don't understand." To which Sally replies, "In that case, they should also ban my math book." Oh, Charlie Brown, and Sally in particular, was so wise. So these are just some of the Holocaust books, you may be familiar with them, that have been removed from library shelves in the recent short period of time. And I'm just going to touch on a few of them. Anne Frank's diary, the graphic adaptation, so that's a graphic novel of her diary, was removed from a library at a high school in Florida for what was deemed to be its sexual content. In 2022, a Tennessee school board banned Art Spiegelman's graphic novel, Mouse. So for those of you who are not familiar, Mouse, Art Spiegelman, of course, is a world-renowned cartoonist and graphic novelist, and his book, Mouse, is about his father's experience of having survived Auschwitz. But as a cartoonist, he depicts different groups as kind of anthropomorphized animals. The Jews are shown as mice, Germans are cats, Poles are pigs, and so on. That book was banned because in the book there is the image of mice, aka Jews, stripping their clothes off. One school board member said that he had not seen the book and he had not read the book, but he banned the book, admitting that he'd only read reviews of the book. Let me mention Night, Elie Wiesel's brilliant memoir of the death of his family, the death of his own innocence, and his despair as a deeply observant Jew confronting the absolute evil of man. This was banned in North Carolina and Texas schools because of the view that its graphic writing could disturb or trigger a negative response from students. And I do fear it is only a matter of time before the next school board or the next library removes other Holocaust books. All of the books that you see here and others are remarkable because they capture the personal, intimate, human experience of the Holocaust. And it is that intimacy, that immediacy, which is the reason why so many Holocaust educators want these books in their classroom. We know that one of the key consequences of book banning is erasure, erasing the past. When we decide that some things are too uncomfortable to talk about, we risk losing the memory of how those things happen. We lose context, we lose people, and we lose the truth. I'm sure it's not lost on many of you that one of the actions taken by the Nazis during the Second World War was to ban and burn books that were deemed to be un-German. So on the left is a slide of a massive book burning that took place in Berlin on May 10th, 1933. And next to it is a memorial to that event that is known as the Empty Library. So this memorial is in the same square where that book burning took place, and it is set into the cobblestones of the plaza, and if you look through the glass, it contains a collection of empty subterranean bookcases to denote the books that are now gone. It's almost as if the books and the bookshelves are sinking into the cobblestones to create a void. Several years after the main structure of the memorial was built, a bronze plaque was inlaid into the cobblestones a few feet away, and it was etched with a quote from the German Jewish author Heinrich Heine, and it features this chilling message: "That was but a prelude. Where they burn books, they will ultimately burn people as well." So with respect to book banning or even burning, the goal is to control the message, control communication, control knowledge. That was the case in 1933, and I worry at times that that is the case with these books that are being banned today. I do believe that book bans and anti-Semitism go hand in hand. We've already talked about the instances of hate crimes rising that are targeting the Jewish community and the likelihood that things will get worse, are getting worse. Banning books like Maus or Night or Anne Frank erases my parents' Jewish experience. It minimizes the trauma of the Holocaust, and it ultimately validates Holocaust denial rhetoric. Now, I heard an interview with Art Spiegelman after his book had been banned, where he said that he was taken aback and quite appalled that the book had been banned, and he said this, quote, "I think it's possible for an adult to say, I don't want my kid reading that book in class, but to forbid other kids from reading it or taking it out of the library, that's authoritarianism." The other thing he said, by the way, was that book sales of Maus had skyrocketed in the months following the book ban. In fact, sales of Maus increased by 750% after the book had been banned. And so to that I say, ban my books and let the sales begin. Okay, so that brings me to what we can do about all of this. We have to be left with something that is positive, something that is hopeful. I will start off by saying that I do not have any magic solutions. I wish I did. And my heart and my mind are heavy with worry about the state of affairs in the world. But there are some hopeful signs. In June 2023, the state of Illinois became the first state to ban book bans. Schools and libraries in Illinois that do so could end up losing state funds. Other states have followed suit with similar legislation, including California, New Jersey, Arkansas, Colorado, Minnesota, and Maryland. And they are all part of what I believe is a growing movement to counteract censorship and uphold intellectual freedom in educational and public institutions. That is good news. And I am hopeful that other states will also follow this trend. Secondly, it's important to know that we have come a long way when it comes to creating literature for young people about this time in history. If you are my age, then you will know that at one time, certainly when I was young, there was only one book about the Holocaust that was available to read, and that would have been? Correct, The Diary of Anne Frank. It was about all you could find for young people to read when it came to literature of the Holocaust. Today, there are dozens who write about this time. In addition to me, there are writers like Carol Matus, Anne Dublin, Jane Yolen, Karen Levine, Art Spiegelman, of course, and so many others. And then there are the survivors themselves who have written about their experiences for a young audience in their memoirs, and I stand behind their memoirs. I believe that these are valid and true accounts. And they include survivors like Inga Auerbach, Gerda Klein, Anna Ornstein, Ernie Weiss, Elie Wiesel, and many others. Next, we know that education can be one of the key components to ensuring that this history, these stories, are not forgotten. So I know that I've been told there are some initiatives here now to begin teaching teaching the Holocaust to young people in lower grades than has previously been done. Back home in my province of Ontario, a couple of years ago, legislation was passed that now mandates Holocaust education must begin in grade 6. Previously, it was only mandated to begin in grade 10. Now it must begin in grade 6. And I'm happy to say that one of my books is the book that is being rolled out across the entire province. To date, there have been about 70,000 copies of the book that have been distributed to grade 6 students. So there is more and more that is being done for young people, enabling them to learn this history and retain this history. And oh my goodness, I only have to listen to these prize winners and Michaela, your one beautiful essay to know that this next generation is certainly learning and learning well. But what about the educators? What is there for the educators? What is there to support the educators in their efforts to continue to bring this history into the classroom? And I will say that there are a lot of events taking place across the country, opportunities for teachers to be supported in the teaching that they do. For example, and this is just one example, there is a remarkable symposium that takes place in North Carolina every year in the charming city of Boone at Appalachian State University. Now, App State is a Christian college, and it happens to have a Center for Judaic, Holocaust, and Peace Studies. And every year, App State brings educators from across the US and parts of Europe to learn how to teach the Holocaust in their classrooms. It's a week-long symposium. And I've been a speaker there for the last 10 years. If you know a teacher who may need support to bring this history into their classroom, this symposium at App State may be the place to go. Next, get books into the hands of your children, your grandchildren, the children in your neighborhood, in your local school, in your local library, especially books about the Holocaust. If these books can be removed from library shelves, make sure they are not removed from the lives of your children. You too can influence the way in which this history is passed on to the next generation. There's a wonderful journalist by the name of Tia Sachs who once said, "The Holocaust is not just an event of historic interest, but one that, amid the rising levels of anti-Semitism, racism, and xenophobia that plague the globe, is more relevant today than ever. So with that in mind, I want to highlight some recent books that I have written, books that I've become more and more interested in writing. And these are stories of individuals that I refer to as heroes of the Holocaust. Certainly the survivors are heroes in my mind, but when I refer to heroes of the Holocaust, I'm talking about those brave non-Jewish individuals who helped or saved their Jewish friends and neighbors during this time. I love writing the stories of survivors, and I will continue to do that. But the stories of rescuers have become particularly important to me in this age of rising anti-Semitism. So these rescuers are individuals who stood apart from the crowd and demonstrated moral courage and good citizenship at this dangerous time in history. They are role models for each and every one of us, and certainly role models for young people. And young people need these role models as an example of what was possible at that time and what may be possible now. There was a psychologist by the name of Eva Fogelman who wrote a book a number of years ago called Conscience and Courage, and here's what she said about the Holocaust. It was a reign which nearly half a century later, and now even further, still challenges our understanding. Evil was rewarded and good acts were punished. Bullies were glorified and the meek trampled. In this mad world, many people lost their bearings. Fear disoriented them and self-protection blinded them. A few, however, did not lose their way. A few took their direction from their own moral compass. I love the last part of that quote. Those who took their direction from their own moral compass. And those are the individuals that I've been writing about lately. At the same time, I have to tell you that stories about rescuers can be a call to action for young people. I often challenge young people when I talk to them to think about how they can begin to put words into action, how they can fight against their own prejudices, how they can speak up when injustice occurs in their communities, and how they can make a commitment to do something positive. Small acts of compassion can go a very long way. The stories of rescuers are a great way for kids to make a meaningful connection to this history and even apply the lessons to their own lives. They allow kids to see others doing something positive, and by extension, they can think about how they can do something positive as well. So I'm going to very briefly highlight 3 of my books that focus on rescuers, and I've chosen these 3, even though there are many others, because they work very well for different age groups. So the writing that I do is geared to kids between the ages of 8 and about 18. So I'm going to give you a book that sort of fits into each age group or clumped age groups along the way. The first book is this one, The Brushmaker's Daughter. So this is an early chapter book that actually works very well for kids in grades 4 to 6 or up to 7. So it tells the story of a wealthy German businessman who you see here, and his name was Otto Weidt. Otto Weidt founded a brush factory in Berlin before the war began. And in that brush factory, he actually harbored dozens of Jewish men and women, employing them in his brush factory and saving them from deportation. What is remarkable about that, even more remarkable about that, is that all of the workers in the Otto Weidt factory were either blind or they were deaf. He himself had lost his sight as a young teen, and I think he had a special compassion for others who were similarly challenged. This is the story of a young Jewish girl named Lillian, along with her father, and they are on the run from the Nazis. Lillian's father is blind, and it appears that no one will help them until they meet Otto Weidt, and he takes them into his factory, employs Lillian's father, and protects them there. And this book follows the dangerous ups and downs and near misses of hiding Jews. This is actually a photograph of some of the real people who were hidden in the Autovite factory and saved from deportation. Although I will say not all of them were saved. Some were actually arrested because of a number of circumstances. If you ever visit Berlin, the site of the Autovite brush factory is now a museum, the Autovite Museum. And in that museum, it's a remarkable tiny museum, but inside there are the stories of most of the people that you see in this photograph. And I've included in the book some of these real people as well. That's the first book. The second one for middle grade is this one, Hidden on the High Wire. So this is the wonderful story of a Jewish circus performer by the name of Irene Danner. And she actually came from a long line of circus performers, Jewish circus performers, and a circus dynasty. Their circus was called the Lorch Family Circus. I always chuckle a little bit when I say the word circus performer and Jewish in the same sentence. When that circus was forced to close down, the Lorch Family Circus, Irene and her mother sought refuge in another circus. This is Irene, of course, that you see here, and one of the posters for their family circus. When that circus closed down, they sought refuge in another circus that was called the Althoff Circus, that was owned and run by this man, a man by the name of Adolf Althoff. And Irene continued to perform in the Althoff Circus under an assumed name for the duration of the war. Again, it was very dangerous for the Althoffs to harbor Irene and her mother. The circus was searched numerous times by the Gestapo. Everyone in the circus knew that Irene was Jewish, and everyone colluded in that secret. What I love about this book, many things, but one of the things I love about it is that it is both the story of a Holocaust survivor, Irene, and it is the story of her rescuer, Adolf Althoff. So it really covers both elements of that history. And finally, Under the Iron Bridge, which is a book for teens, highlights a group of young people between the ages of 14 and 17 who called themselves the Edelweiss Pirates. So I do research about this history all the time. I'm always doing deep dives into various websites and reading any number of books that I can find. And this name, Edelweiss Pirates, popped up one day when I was doing research, and knowing nothing about them, I just thought the name was so intriguing, I knew that I had to find out more. So the Edelweiss Pirates, this group of teenagers, became the largest teenage resistance movement in Nazi Germany. By the end of the war, they numbered approximately 5,000. And they called themselves the Edelweiss Pirates because they wore on their collar or lapel a pin in the shape of the Edelweiss flower. You can see it here on the slide. So the Edelweiss flower actually grows in Austria, and it grows out of the side of rocky mountains and hillsides, and it's known to be this incredibly hardy, resilient plant. It doesn't need much water, it doesn't need much light to survive. And that's how the Edelweiss Pirates saw themselves. They saw themselves as tough and resilient and able to survive no matter what. So they were completely opposed to Nazi ideology and Nazi thinking. And in particular, they rejected everything having to do with the Hitler Youth. So on the left, of course, is a picture of Hitler Youth and Adolf Hitler inspecting those boys. Hitler Youth, of course, was a mandatory organization for boys over the age of 13. Hitler was, of course, grooming these boys to be future Nazi soldiers, future soldiers in his army. There was, by the way, an equivalent organization for girls that was called the League of Girls. The girls were not being groomed to be soldiers at that time, but they were, of course, being groomed to be good women who would grow up and marry Hitler Youth, Nazi soldiers, and bear the next generation of Nazis as well. Edelweiss Pirates rejected everything to do with the Hitler Youth. As you can see the photograph on the right, they looked completely different from the Hitler Youth. They wore their hair long, they wore colorful clothing, they sang songs of protest. But over the course of the war, they became more defiant, more militant. They began to offer shelter to escaped prisoners from concentration camps. They made armed raids on military depots. They stole explosives and supplied them to other resistance groups. Their activities were considered completely subversive by the Nazi government. Those who were caught were sent to prison. Some were hanged. So this is the story of a German boy named Paul, who is forced to join the Hitler Youth, as all boys are, but he discovers the Edelweiss Pirates and makes the difficult and dangerous decision to leave the Hitler Youth and become a member of this incredible group. What I love about this book, because it is about a group of teenage resistance fighters, I think the identification for teens reading about teens can be really strong and really allow teens to see themselves in that position. I will also say that all three of the individuals that I've highlighted in these three books, Otto Veit in The Brushmaker's Daughter, Adolf Althoff, the owner of the Althoff Circus in Hidden on the High Wire, and the Edelweiss Pirates as a group, they were all subsequently named Righteous Among the Nations. Righteous Among the Nations is the highest honor that the state of Israel can bestow upon anyone who has helped or saved Jews during the Holocaust, and they were recognized for their efforts to help Jews at that time. So I want to talk about one more book, and it isn't one of mine. I happen to be a big fan of the late writer Chaim Potok. I don't know if you're familiar with his writing. The book The Chosen is probably one of his best-known books, but you may have also heard of My Name is Asher Lev or others that he has written. I want to talk about the third book in this group of books, a book called Old Men at Midnight, which is arguably one of his lesser-known books. So Old Men at Midnight actually is 3 novellas put together into one book that focus on a woman by the name of Ilana Din. And Ilana Din appears in each of these 3 novellas where she interacts with 3 different men, one of whom was a Holocaust survivor. His name was Leon Chertoff. So this is a tiny conversation that Ilana is having with Leon. Leon says, "There are stories I can tell, but I would never put anything in writing." And Ilana says, "Then your stories will die with you." Leon says, "So they will. Who needs stories of yet another Jew?" To which Ilana replies, "I need them. Without stories, there is nothing. Stories are the world's memory. The past is erased without stories." I love that. At this time of Holocaust remembrance, and in these difficult days around the world, I find myself thinking a lot about how stories can influence and convey our collective experience. I'm thinking about 6 million Jews and each individual in that number who perished in the Holocaust along with 5 million others. I'm thinking about my ancestors who faced violence and anti-Semitism in their generation and in every generation, including this one. I hope that all of us are thinking about the impact of losing this history when stories about this time are challenged or suppressed or prohibited. This cannot happen. There has never been a more important time to celebrate these important books, to distribute them as widely as possible, to talk about them, and to learn from our past. Never again is now, and now is on us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kaser. We do have 2 questions. The first is, what do you think about novels which sanitize the history or are written without the input of the Jewish community or other survivor groups? And I'll go ahead and tell you the second question if you'd like. What's your next book about?
So that's a very good question, sanitizing. I can think of that in several different ways. First of all, it is true that, and I'm going to be talking to educators tomorrow, and we'll be talking more about this, but books have to be written sensitive to the age and stage of development of the reader. So some might call it sanitizing. Others might just say we need to simplify the history for the young readers and then begin to introduce more and more and more as young people are able to absorb more and more and more. We don't want to traumatize young people and turn them away from learning this history. So I do believe in history unfolding. Non-Jewish people being involved in the writing of these stories, it's so interesting because we talk a lot about appropriation these days and how important it is not to appropriate someone else's history. I have a slightly different view of this, and maybe it's because we are now 80 years away from the time when the concentration camps were liberated, and because there are fewer and fewer survivors. I welcome anyone to write about this history, as long as you do your research, as long as you do your homework, as long as you are accurate in what you are writing, as long as you bring those into the process that can help you and endorse the work that you're doing. If you want to write about this history, more power to you. The more the better, as far as I'm concerned. Let us all write stories about this history. I think that would be wonderful. What am I writing next? So I'm in the middle of editing, actually, a new book that will be out in the fall that is about the stumbling stones of Europe. So raise your hand if you know what the stumbling stones are. Oh, good. Not many people do. And this is what I love to do, is find a piece of history that not everyone knows about. So stumbling stones are small brass plaques, just a couple of inches by a few inches, that have been laid into the cobblestones in cities around the world in front of the last home where a Jewish person lived and from where they were taken and sent to the concentration camps. There are over 100,000 stumbling stones in 30 countries and 700 cities. It's one of they call it the largest decentralized monument to the Holocaust. So I'm writing a book that will take young readers on a journey around the world, stopping in various cities, finding the stumbling stones of that city, and learning the stories of some of those people who lived in those homes. Now that I've told you about the stumbling stones, if you have the opportunity to travel anywhere in Europe, look down when you're walking, especially on a cobblestone road. I guarantee you will come across a stumbling stone laid into the pavement. Thank you.
As she mentioned, tomorrow at 5 p.m., Ms. Kaser is leading a session for educators on the topic of teaching sensitive material to young people. And she has assured me that aside from her introduction, it is a completely different talk than the one she just gave. And participants will receive educational materials, including at least one of her books. There is still space for a few more attendees, and there is no cost to attend. There will be flyers at the reception with more information about how to register, and registration is appreciated by noon tomorrow. So if you're a teacher or know a teacher, please share the word. Ms. Kaser, thank you for being here today and sharing your story and the stories of so many others.
Part of what I appreciated about the story that we were hearing was many of the little anecdotes we got were about survivors. But we know that we're also here to remember. I don't know how many of you know people who were survivors who got to tell you the stories of those who did not survive. I don't know how many of you have learned about stories of the people who did not survive. I don't know how many of us have imaginations that can fathom the amount of loss and the kind of loss that it took for 11 million lives to be lost. I appreciate the conversations that we had about how statistics can desensitize the number of lives that have been lost. But we also are here to remember and honor the memories. So what has become our tradition is that we light 11 candles. Each candle represents 1 million people. 1 million people. The Holocaust claimed the lives of 11 million victims, 6 million Jews, 2/3 of the Jewish population of Europe, and 5 million others. If you're not Jewish, you may not know a Jew. Hope you get to know us in the reception. But there are other people who died who were victims, and you probably know some of these people. It included LGBTQ individuals, physically or mentally disabled, Roma or Romani people, the Slavs, Jehovah's Witnesses, Christian priests and other clergy, courageous resistors, black or mulatto adults and children, anyone who opposed the politics of the leadership, anyone related to any of the above, and many others. Father Cannon told us about the bells. If we were to try to honor the memory of each individual with a minute of silence, which is sometimes our tradition to do, to have a moment of silence to remember, 1 minute of silence for each of those 11 million people, we would be standing here for 11 and a half years. Instead, survivors, their descendants, and local officials representing others will now light 11 candles in memory of the 11 million. They are not coming up in any specific order, but if you turn to page 4, you will see who the people are who are coming to honor the memories of those who died and who they are representing. And we take a moment of silence as they light the candles to honor the memories.
Let us all turn to page 5, Memorial Prayers. I invite everyone to join me for the prayer for the righteous of the nations. Creator of all, let there be perfect rest for the souls of the righteous whose hands and hearts were open, whose self-sacrifice was limitless. They risked all they had to hide and rescue our brothers and sisters during the Shoah. As they gave shelter and care to others, shelter them in your presence, for they are the holy and pure, and their light shines like the radiance of heaven. Hold them close to you forever. May they find a home in you, and may they rest in peace. Together we say, Amen. An additional prayer for all who died in the Holocaust, in the Shoah. Let us pray. God of all, let there be perfect rest for the souls of the 6 million who died as Jews in the flames of the Shoah. Let there be perfect rest for the millions of others who died because of race, religion, or nationality, political affiliation, or sexual orientation. Hold them close to you forever. Seal their souls for everlasting life in the shelter of your presence, for you are their eternal home. Together we say, Amen.
And now I invite Miss Jewett Winston and the combined choirs of Uri Middle and Captain Shreve High School for their presentation. That was the most beautiful way to close our time together today. It says I have remarks, but I really don't, so do not be in fear. I do want to direct you, however, to the reception where there is fine, delicious food and drink for you, and that is to my right. My mother said don't point, and she made me too afraid to point. It's that way. And there's a room there called the parlor, and that's where everybody will be going. I hope to see you there. I do want to point out on page 6 a whole host of thank yous that made today possible. Our thanks must extend to Rabbi Jana and to Barbara Joseph for their tireless efforts to maintain our focus on this very difficult, but as I said, indispensable subject matter. And so with that, I would just say, Holy One, you have blessed us today with this time. You have blessed us with remembering. You have blessed us with hope. And all God's children said, Amen. Thank you for coming.